Every neighborhood has its secrets, but some are darker than others. Behind the doors of this ordinary suburban home, a storm was brewing, one that would shatter the lives within and leave a trail of devastation no one saw coming. A man torn between his past and his present, a love that could never be, and a betrayal that would end in murder. This is the story of how one man's hidden desires led to the ultimate sacrifice and the complete destruction of everything he held dear. John Thompson had meticulously crafted what appeared to be the perfect life in a picturesque suburban neighborhood. He had a loving wife, Lisa Thompson, 2 children, and a home that was the envy of their friends and neighbors. However, beneath this ideal facade, John was tormented by a secret rooted deep within his past, his true sexual identity, which he had repressed after a deep and passionate relationship with Michael Whitman during his college years. Raised by a strict and devout pastor father in a conservative small town, John grew up under the suffocating weight of religious expectations and community scrutiny. His father's sermons often condemned anything that strayed from traditional moral values, leaving John feeling trapped and terrified of his own desires. When he moved to a major city for college, John hoped to escape this oppressive environment. It was there that he met Michael Whitman, a fellow student who was everything John was taught to fear, confident, charismatic, and openly gay. Michael quickly became John's world. Their relationship was intense, filled with secret rendezvous and whispered dreams of a future together. But as graduation approached, the pressure to conform to societal norms and the fear of his father's reaction overwhelmed John. One day, without warning, he ended the relationship, leaving Michael heartbroken and confused. John moved to another city, determined to bury his past and build a new life. He met Lisa, whose bright, traditional outlook seemed to offer the stability he craved. They married, had children, and John threw himself into his new life, pushing his true self further into the shadows. After ending his relationship with Michael, John threw himself into his new life with Lisa. He was determined to bury his past, to forget the intense emotions that had once consumed him. But moving on wasn't as easy as he had hoped. Every time he looked at Lisa, he was reminded of the life he was supposed to lead, the life his father would approve of, the life society expected of him. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the house was still and Lisa was asleep beside him, John's thoughts would drift back to Michael. He would recall the late-night conversations, the shared dreams, and the passion that made him feel truly alive. These memories haunted him, filling him with a sense of longing and regret that he couldn't shake. He told himself that he had made the right choice, that he had chosen the path of stability and normalcy. But deep down, there was always a part of him that wondered what could have been. Over the years, John perfected the art of suppressing these thoughts, focusing on his work, his family, and the suburban life he had built. But no matter how hard he tried, the shadow of his past never fully disappeared. It lingered at the edges of his mind, a reminder of the life he had abandoned. But the past has a way of resurfacing. Years later, at a business seminar, John unexpectedly reunited with Michael Whitman. The moment he saw him, John's heart raced. Michael hadn't changed. He was still as magnetic and confident as ever. Initially, John was overwhelmed with guilt and fear, uncertain if he should reconnect with Michael. He knew what was at stake: his marriage, his children, his carefully constructed life. Michael, sensing John's hesitation, reached out to him repeatedly. He was persistent, reminding John of the love they once shared, the connection that never truly faded. Michael's charm and persistence eventually wore John down. The old feelings took John by surprise, stirring desires he had long suppressed. Despite his reservations, John agreed to meet with Michael. Their first meeting was filled with nervous energy, but as the evening progressed, the familiarity and comfort of being with Michael wrapped around John like a warm blanket. They talked for hours, and by the end of the night, John found himself drawn back into Michael's world. The affair began slowly, with secret meetings and stolen glances, but it quickly escalated into something much more consuming. John felt alive again, but also deeply conflicted. He knew he was betraying Lisa, but he couldn't resist the pull of the life he had once dreamed of living. As the affair continued, John's guilt began to manifest in his behavior at home. He became distant, avoiding eye contact with Lisa, often lost in thought. Lisa, perceptive and intuitive, noticed the change. Her suspicions grew, but she didn't want to believe the worst. One night, driven by a gnawing need for answers, she searched John's smartphone while he was asleep. The intimate messages she found between John and Michael confirmed her worst fears. The betrayal hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless and devastated. The next morning, Lisa confronted John with the evidence. John, caught off guard, confessed to the affair. Lisa was furious, but beneath her anger was a deep well of sorrow. She loved John and wanted to fight for their marriage, so she gave him an ultimatum: end the affair with Michael and commit to their family, or she would leave him. John, overwhelmed with guilt and fear of losing his family, promised to end things with Michael. But Michael's hold on John was too strong. Michael, sensing the danger of losing John, intensified his manipulation. He began to sow seeds of doubt in John's mind, painting a picture of a future where they could be together without hiding. Michael convinced John that the only way they could truly be together was if Lisa was out of the picture. John was conflicted and terrified, but Michael's influence, combined with his own suppressed desires, led him down a dark path. They began to plan Lisa's murder in secret. Michael took the lead, using his charm and influence to convince John that this was the only way they could be free. They decided to make it look like an accident, a tragic mishap during a family hike. The plan was meticulous. Michael would wait in the forest, hidden among the trees, while John would bring Lisa to the designated spot. On the day of the murder, John lured Lisa to the remote part of the forest, under the pretense of a family hiking trip. Lisa, still reeling from the betrayal, but trying to hold on to hope for their marriage, agreed to go, believing they were trying to mend their relationship. As they reached the secluded spot, Lisa was startled to see Michael emerge from the shadows. Her confusion quickly turned to horror, realizing the depths of the betrayal. The confrontation that followed was charged with raw emotion and desperation. In a moment of manipulated panic and Michael's sinister urging, John acted. He grabbed a rock from the forest floor and struck Lisa from behind. As she fell to the ground, dazed and bleeding, John, tears streaming down his face, knelt beside her and strangled her, whispering apologies through sobs as he took her life. After the murder, John and Michael worked quickly to cover their tracks. They buried Lisa in a hastily dug grave, covering her body with leaves and dirt. As they drove back to town, the weight of what they had done began to settle on John. He felt numb, disconnected from reality, as if he were living someone else's life. Michael, however, seemed unfazed, already talking about their future together, as if nothing had happened. When they returned home, John reported Lisa missing to the police. He played the part of the worried husband, describing how she had wandered off during their hike and never returned. The police launched a search, and for a few days it seemed like John and Michael might get away with their crime. But the guilt gnawed at John, haunting his every waking moment and invading his dreams at night. He became increasingly erratic, unable to maintain the facade of normalcy. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure began to mount on John. Despite his initial attempts to maintain the appearance of a grieving husband, the strain was becoming unbearable. Every interaction with the police felt like a game of psychological warfare, with John constantly second-guessing his own words and actions. His paranoia grew. He found himself scrutinizing the faces of the detectives, searching for any sign that they suspected him. At home, the walls seemed to close in on him. The once comforting silence of his house now felt oppressive, filled with the echoes of Lisa's absence. John's nerves were frayed, and his attempts to act normally around his children became increasingly strained. They noticed the change in their father, but he dismissed their concerns with forced smiles and weak assurances. Michael, sensing John's growing anxiety, urged him to stay calm and stick to their story. But even his voice on the phone began to feel like an accusation. The weight of the crime was crushing John, and it was only a matter of time before he cracked under the pressure. Meanwhile, the police investigation intensified. The inconsistencies in John's story began to unravel, and the forensic evidence in the forest pointed directly to him. A hiker eventually discovered Lisa's shallow grave, and the police were quick to connect the dots. John was arrested, and under the pressure of interrogation, he broke down and confessed to everything. The arrest was swift and disorienting. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, John's world spun out of control. The life he had meticulously constructed was crumbling before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The ride to the police station felt like an eternity, the weight of what was happening pressing down on him with suffocating force. In the interrogation room, the cold, clinical environment only heightened his sense of dread. He was no longer just a suspect. He was a man whose secrets were being stripped away layer by layer. The evidence the detectives laid out in front of him was undeniable, and John could feel the last vestiges of his defense slipping away. The hours dragged on, each question digging deeper into his fragile psyche until he could no longer hold back. By the time the confession escaped his lips, John was a broken man, hollowed out by the weight of his own guilt. Meanwhile, Michael remained defiant, never admitting to the crime. He maintained his innocence, claiming that John was lying out of desperation. But the detectives weren't convinced. John's detailed confession, coupled with the incriminating messages exchanged between the two men, painted a damning picture. The police saw Michael as the mastermind behind the plot, the one who had manipulated John into committing the unthinkable. Despite his denials, the weight of the evidence against him was overwhelming. As John was led to a holding cell, the cold metal bars closing behind him with a definitive clang that echoed in his mind, Michael's fate was also being sealed by the very words and plans they had once shared in secrecy. John's trial became a media sensation, with the shocking details of the affair and the murder captivating the public. The courtroom was packed every day with reporters and spectators eager to see how the drama would unfold. John was sentenced to life in prison, the weight of his actions finally crushing him. In prison, he became a shadow of his former self, haunted by the memory of Lisa's last moments and the realization that he had destroyed not only her life, but his own as well. In prison, John and Michael were held in separate facilities, with no opportunity for communication. Isolated and burdened by guilt, Michael spiraled into a deep depression. 3 years into his sentence, he ended his own life, unable to bear the weight of his actions and the loss of the life he had imagined with John. Meanwhile, John's mental health rapidly deteriorated. The guilt and isolation became too much for him to bear, and his mind began to unravel. He lost touch with reality, his psyche completely blocking out the memory of killing Lisa. John would often scream out in the middle of the night, begging to see his family, convinced that Lisa and the children were still waiting for him at home. His cries echoed through the sterile walls of the prison, a haunting reminder of the man he once was, now lost in the depths of his own fractured mind. John had sacrificed his true love for a life of normalcy, only to find that the normal life he built was a fragile illusion. When his hidden desires resurfaced, he destroyed the very life he had fought so hard to create. In the end, he lost everything, his family, his freedom, and the man he loved. Michael, too, faced the consequences of his actions, but the greater tragedy lay in John's downfall. In trying to escape the expectations of his past, he became a prisoner of his own choices. Now, alone in his cell, John is left to reflect on the life he could have had he been true to himself from the beginning. But all that remains are the ghosts of the choices he made and the lives he destroyed along the way. John Thompson's tragic tale is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of living a life built on secrets and lies. In the end, he lost everything: his family, his freedom, and even his sanity. The choices we make can define us, for better or for worse, and the price of deception can be far greater than we ever imagined. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that explore the darker side of human nature. And remember, sometimes the most perfect lives are hiding the most chilling secrets.